Hi, everyone. Dr. Rose here, coming to you just for a few minutes to discuss a topic none of us want to discuss, right? The topic of suicide. Nobody wants to discuss this, but it's so necessary that we have this discussion because, in addition to a couple high profile suicides in the last few weeks, we know with this pandemic, suicide rates have skyrocketed. And I'm a firm believer that we need to shift from conversations on prevention. Not that we don't need to prevent suicide, so just follow me with this, but we need to have more dialogue on awareness as to what to look out for, but also awareness of the whys. Because oftentimes people get so hung up on why would they do it? And that does nothing in educating us, that even when I posted about the young lady, Chesley Christ, when I posted about her suicide today, there were several people who just they commented that this has to be foul play. I don't believe she committed suicide. And yes, the police have to investigate every suicide to make sure foul play is not involved. But the reason we automatically go there is because it's a hard time. It's our defense mechanisms. We're having a hard time just finding space in our head to accept the fact that someone as beautiful as this woman was, with it seemed her whole life in front of her, well accomplished, so well accomplished in her 30 years. Who wants to believe that someone like that would resort to taking their own life? So it's easier for us to soothe our defenses by saying to ourselves, I don't believe she did it. I don't believe she did it. When I posted about Regina King's son taking his life, that started a whole firestorm on my thread. I stayed out of it. But individuals who, because there was a caption that said, he cared so much, and someone responded, he couldn't have cared so much if he took his life, and now he has his mom suffering. And again, this goes behind us not really understanding the whys. And it's so important for us to understand why people resort to suicide so we can hopefully lessen the impact that this has on people's lives to bring them to a point that they want to take their lives. So let me talk about some of the whys, okay? Because I think there's enough out here that tells us the warning signs. I'll put warning signs at the end of this video so you can look at that. I don't need to spend time on the warning signs because most of us are looking for the obvious warning signs, right? The things that it's like, oh, that person looks like they're on the ledge. But the reality is, for a lot of people, there are no warning signs. Like this young lady, if you looked at her social media page in the last few weeks, it was a social media page of someone who looked just so happy and in tune and full of life and connected and beautiful. And again, she had the world was her oyster. She had her whole world and whole life ahead of her. No one would have imagined that this woman, who 2 weeks ago was just joyfully interviewing Denzel Washington on her platform, who was, just really modeling along the streets of New York, just looking just so beautiful and full of life. No one wants to believe that this woman could have been in a headspace to make her want to kill herself, to take her own life. So let's talk about the whys so you can become more aware of why people may choose this way out, why people may choose suicide as their only option. I tell people oftentimes, imagine the most intense physical pain you've ever been in. And some people never been in intense physical pain, so that's hard for you to imagine. But when we talk about individuals going through emotional pain, it's so perverse because when we're in physical pain, we can complain about it. We can go to our doctor. They can give us some medications to help the pain. People rally around us. They support us because, oh my gosh, this person has this physical ailment or illness that's causing them discomfort. And what can we do about it? But when a person is suffering emotionally with emotional pain, oftentimes no one recognizes. And they're coming out every day, putting this big, beautiful smile on their face for everyone else. because they recognize the stigma that exists in mental illness. They recognize that if they told someone they're struggling and they're like, you're struggling? What? You're 30 and you're an attorney. You're 30 and you're Miss USA. You're 30 and you have the whole, your whole life ahead of you. What do you have to complain about? This is the issue we have. Oftentimes, individuals' emotional pain is discounted, is not validated, and they end up suffering in silence. The best thing that we all can do for people we love, for our community, for our culture, is to start validating mental illness. Start validating emotional distress as not a character flaw, but as a real illness that is eating up a person's ability to be able to function properly. So the whys could be biology. We can have people with major depression disorder. We have people with schizophrenia. We have people with bipolar disorder, where there's dysfunction going on in the brain. The chemicals, the neurotransmitters that keep us balanced emotionally are not functioning properly. And these people need medication to help balance it out so they can be okay. The reasons, the whys could be anything from situational, a person experiencing grief, a person experiencing loss, any type of loss, job loss, financial loss, loss of independence, if they're having a physical ailment or some type of physical chronic disease that they don't see any relief from. All these type of situational stressors that can come in and cause a person to feel hopeless, to cause a person to feel like there's no way out. And we know when we are overwhelmed, because this is what situational stressors do to us, they overwhelm us. We don't make right decisions. We don't make proper decisions. Oftentimes there's sleep deprivation involved. And we know when a person's involved with sleep deprivation, their reality is skewed. You talk about, and that can be situational, but even when we talk about the biology and some of the mental illnesses that I talked about, reality can be skewed. So their reality could be the best way out is to take your own life. Their reality could be that there's voices that's telling them this is what they need to do for whatever reason. We have to educate ourselves. Medication interaction. I mean, there are medications that people take and their biology may not be compatible to that medication, and it could be causing suicidal ideation for them. I have to always go back to a young lady who was a client of mine probably over a decade ago. And she was coming to me regularly for job related issues, learning how to cope better on the job. And one particular session, she came in and I could tell when she walked in the door, something was different about her. There was like a flat affect. There was like a depressive quality about her I'd never seen before. And I'd been seeing this person for some time. And depression was just not one of her issues. Again, it was workplace stress, situational stuff going on in career. And she shared with me in that session how over the last several weeks, she'd been having just an ongoing progressive, and it was coming on stronger and stronger each day, of depression and not being able to get out of the bed in the morning and calling into work. And we tried to identify what could have been happening in her life, and nothing. There was no change in relationship status. There was nothing that happened at work that had her feeling this way. And it just wasn't making any sense. Then I remembered how several sessions prior, she shared with me how she had just started a new birth control pill. And the light bulb went off in my head, because I went back to a time 15 plus years ago when I started a new birth control. My GYN put me on a new birth control. And within 2 weeks of this new birth control, now anybody that knows me know I'm typically happy-go-lucky. I'm, probably one of the most optimistic people you can know. I started feeling an onset, just like this client was describing, of depressive symptoms coming over me, to the point that I was having a hard time functioning daily. And it scared me, because this wasn't me. And I had young children at the time, and I needed to tend to these young children, but my mood state was off. I was tearful. And then one day I actually started having thoughts like, why am I even here? That scared me. And I remember pulling my computer out, going online, and I checked this medication. It was a NuvaRing. Now, doesn't mean nothing's wrong with the NuvaRing. It just had that interaction for me. And it listed suicidal ideation as a potential side effect. I immediately removed it. And within 2 or 3 days, it was like that whole cloud had lifted off of me. And I went to my doctor and explained to her what I experienced. And she kind of just shook her head and she said, yeah, I kid you not. She said, yeah, that's one of the side effects. But we don't tell you that. We don't tell our patients that because we don't want to plant that seed. And all I could think about at that moment was, what if I had not did the research? All I could think about at that moment was how many women out here now, or how many women I'd seen over the years suffering from depression, where this depression was due to this medication interaction. These suicidal ideations were due to this medication that was not good for them, the side effect that's not compatible to their biology. I couldn't help but think about how many people potentially had even taken their lives because this medication side effect caused that interaction, that side effect for them, and caused them to take their life. So it's important for us to advocate and to educate ourselves, not just for our sake, but for the people around me. Imagine if I had not had that experience personally with my client. I may not have even gone there. When I shared it with her, she too had her birth control removed immediately. And the next time I saw her, it was all lifted. It was all gone. So the whys, guys, the whys, it's so easy for us to want to believe this is something none of us would ever be faced with. It's so easy for us to want to say, what could be so wrong in that person's life? But we have no idea of what is going on in a person's psyche, in a person's biology, in a person's even life situations at the time that could lead them to want to just end it all. Again, I think about how exhausting it had to be for this young lady, Chesley Christ, for her to show up each and every day with this bright smile, knowing that internally there was an internal war going on to the point that it led her to take her own life. I think about that and I just feel it's my responsibility to come to you guys and have this conversation and encourage you. I didn't want to go too long, so I could lecture. I taught college for 11 years, so I could fill a whole semester on lecturing on this. I just want you guys to understand the whys are many, understand that we should educate ourselves and we should advocate for ourselves as well as our loved ones, and to understand, as much as we want to believe this couldn't happen to us or this couldn't happen in our home, it can. Many of you know I lost a niece in the fall of 2018 to suicide, and it was biological. She was bipolar, was not taking her medication, and everyone who speaks of her, all they say is, but she always had this big, beautiful smile on her face, and she did, big, beautiful smile. But again, when we're dealing with biology and a person's reality becomes skewed, they see this as their only option. And as hard as it may be for us to accept, when a person has made it up in their mind that this is the route they're going to take, if you recognize that, your job is to hospitalize them, get them to a hospital, try to prevent it from happening. We did it with our niece. But the reality is, again, if a person does not stay compliant with treatment, medication, and they've made it up in their mind that this is what they're going to do, this is their only option, there's very little at some point in time that we can do to stop it. And no one wants to hear that, but that's the reality of it. That's why it's so important for us to educate ourselves, become more aware of the whys, so we can be proactive in preventing it from even getting to that point of no return. So I hope this helps, guys. Please ask questions, drop your comments in there. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you. And just know, it's our responsibility to educate ourselves. We got to shatter the stigma of mental illness. Mental illness is an illness no different than physical illness. It requires care. It requires us to educate ourselves, and it requires us to stay very consistent and intentional in seeking the help that we need to get ourselves in the optimal emotional state.